Okay, let's see if this cycle works. So, I am not the youth that I'm talking about here. I'm the gray hair. Leticia Flores, I identify as heterosexual, I identify as cisgender, my pronouns are she, her, hers, and that's like just a little taste of some of the vocabulary that's out there that we're learning. I'm still learning to remember to state my pronouns when I introduce myself to people, and we'll get into what that's all about. And I consider myself an ally of the LGBTQ community. Okay, so the objective for today's talk, and it's a big one, and I'm going to throw a lot of information at you if you would like copies of the slides and have to provide those to you, and to talk with you afterwards if you have any questions. But I really want to introduce you to some of the growing alphabet, the vocabulary related to sexual orientation and gender identity. And hereafter I'll just call it SOGI, S-O-G-I. And what those related to, I think most of us are pretty familiar with SOGI, sexual orientation. It is inherent or immutable, enduring, emotional, romantic, or sexual attraction to other people. How does this apply to children, right? When we think of sexual orientation, I think we normally think of adults and how adults interact with each other. Children have crushes. Children are interested in friends in school and friends in class. So even though we don't think of sexuality the same way, there is a sexual component, there's an attraction component in children. And the research indicates that it actually develops fairly early in children. If you think about yourself as a child, you probably knew who you liked. That's what orientation is about. Gender identity is one's innermost concept of self, as male, female, a blend of both and neither. And I'll get into more detail about that. How individuals perceive themselves and what they call themselves. I'm a woman. He's a man. She's a girl. He's a boy. One's gender identity can be the same or different from their assigned sex at birth. And we'll get into those things. I think I slipped this slide. Okay. Oh, that's right. That's it. All right. So even that might be new to some people, and we'll get into some of those details. So why is it important to be SOGI affirming? This is a slide I actually borrowed from a colleague of mine, Vita Kavar. She's an LMFT. She moved here from California a couple years ago. Still consults with California state schools and the custody system, but she also consults with folks all around the country regarding incorporating SOGI standards of care within schools, within foster care systems, etc. And some of the research that they found was that in 2016, I just wanted to give her credit, the Center for the Study of Social Policy did a 2016 study looking at LGBTQ youth in child welfare. They found that close to 1/4 of youth in out-of-home care identified as LGBTQ. Over half of those who identify as LGBTQ are youth of color. The study notes that these numbers likely are an underestimation, since they did not include statistics on youth who identify as transgender or non-binary. Again, more terms I'm going to explain a little bit later. About a third of LGBTQ identifying youth reported experiencing violence at the hands of family members after disclosing their identity. So this is a big deal regarding rejection, regarding violence, regarding abuse. And as you all know, those kinds of experiences have mental health effects and implications on you. Another study that was done, again I borrowed this from Vita because she does great talks on this. If you want her information, I'm happy to send it to you. We do a lot of talks together for different organizations. In one study, about 25% of gay teens who came out with their parents or guardians were told that they must leave home. Anyone who's familiar with the homeless population in Knoxville or other cities, there's a very large percentage of those youth who are homeless who identify as sexual or gender minorities. They also leave home due to physical, sexual, and emotional abuse. They report that they're threatened, belittled, and abused at shelters by staff and other residents. I think that this is a really interesting one, particularly for those of you who work in institutions or organizations who work with LGBT youth. it's hard to keep up with the terms. And I think many times there are good intentions. You want to treat the children well, you want to do no harm. But sometimes these notions of how they identify or how they're treated maybe by other children in the area or certain individuals within the institution really does have a negative effect on them. And so this is, again, this is what VITA aims to work towards. Whoa. Sorry about that. Okay. More now, the Family Acceptance Project, they do a lot of work looking at, talking about this issue regarding families and children, especially as it revolves around faith. They do a lot of research in this area. They indicated in their national statistics that LGBTQ youth who are rejected by their parents and caregivers were more than 8 times as likely to have attempted suicide, 6 times as likely to report high levels of depression, more than 3 times likely to use illegal drugs, and more than 3 times as likely to be at high risk for HIV and STDs. And I want to emphasize with this slide, this is not a result of their sexual orientation or gender identity. This is a result of rejection and abuse based on their sexual orientation and gender identity. I think a lot of institutions and individuals who do not approve of LGBTQ youth often erroneously link these kinds of signs of mental health distress to the actual identity of the child or the adult. And that is an erroneous link. Any child, any child in their lives who are rejected or threatened or felt unwelcome in their home will have higher rates of depression, suicide, and mental health issues. But this is a real issue, and this is something that research and social policy has been trying to address for some time. This is what we see in the UT Psych Clinic. So we're getting increasing numbers, I think because I'm out doing workshops, etc. We're getting increasing numbers of LGBTQ youth who are seeking services for us, either evaluations or psychology. Parents hear about us, kids hear about us, there's a great need. It's not that they don't exist, it's that they're not visible. They're becoming increasingly visible. Okay. Just what I was saying. Why is this issue so important? Why do I feel the need to talk about these things? History has long either unintentionally or intentionally erased or diminished aspects of people related to SOGI, sexual orientation, gender identity. For a long time, it's very similar to representation for other underrepresented minorities. I'm Mexican American. It took a long time for me to start seeing Mexican American faculty in schools. It took a long time for me to start seeing representations of Mexican Americans in media and culture. Same thing for LGBTQ people. So we don't see a lot of it. They are there. So what we're seeing, and why I thought I wanted to talk about this bridging the gaps, is that the youth, we find the youth are the ones who are pushing this movement in our society. They are advocating for increased and accurate representation of SOGI today. So we all here as helping professionals meet the client where they're at, right? Meet the patient where they're at. This is where the youth are at. This is where they're at. This is what they're talking about. These are their concepts that are going around. And so it's really, I think, vital for us to be able to meet them where they're at. Know the language, know the ideas. Okay. 2 big pieces, and this kind of relates to policy and protocol, whatever institution you're at, right? I'm at the university. This is a big issue at the university regarding students. LGBTQ students want to be more represented in the community. So one of the questions we've been asking is, well, why don't we put a link on admissions, on applications for students to self-identify as LGBTQ? Because we don't have good numbers about how many LGBTQ students are at the university. Administration is afraid of that because, and they're afraid for good intentions. They're afraid that by putting that on the application, it will somehow force a student to out themselves when they're not ready or they don't want to. And that is a valid concern. That's really what this gets to, is that the act of sharing certain aspects of a youth or an adult's sexual orientation and identity should be the individual's choice, right? But providing the opportunity to share that information should be a responsibility of an institution or an organization. So one of the things we've been talking about with the admissions at UT is that you can put the button, it can be optional. People don't have to answer it. But if they want to answer it, they can. All right, so that's the difference. It's very much within child-focused organizations. So this is something that Vita puts in her slide that I borrowed. You always want to consult with the child, with the youth, about what information they want to disclose regarding their SOGI, and you don't want to disclose it against the child's wishes. The reason why this is so important is that often children are open to some people. They're not open to others. Right? They might be open to the school nurse at school. They're not open at home with their parents. And so it's a very, it's like a landmine. It's a field of landmines for many children. And then it becomes a little bit of a landmine for us. But we want to be respectful to the child if we know this information, if they're open to us about it, whether they want us to share it with who, with, and when, and how. So those are just some protocol issues. Keep using all these letters. I'm going to talk to you about that. Okay. Anybody have any questions so far or thoughts to clarify? Okay. So, LGBTQ. I'm going to focus on the first three. Sexual orientation. Again, most of us, I think, are fairly familiar with sexual orientation. A lesbian is a girl or woman who is emotionally, romantically, sexually attracted to other girls or women. And I include girls in there because girls have crushes. Gay, boys or men who are emotionally, romantically, or sexually attracted to other boys or men. Bisexual, boys and girls who are emotionally, etc., attracted to both. The bisexual community, again, has existed for a very long time. They have had issues being accepted by lesbian and gays. A lot of times, lesbians and gays would tell bisexuals, oh, well, you just haven't decided yet. Or, you're just afraid to identify as one or the other. No. In fact, bisexuality, according to the research, according to what we've seen from quantitative and qualitative studies, is a form of sexual attraction. Heterosexual, we know is straight, right? This is the majority of the population, as far as we know. Individuals who are attracted to individuals whose sex differs from them. All right. All right. This is where the youth start coming in and playing with these ideas. For a very long time, we thought of the concept of the binary, either or, one or the other. So, you're either a man or a woman, and you're either gay or straight. Okay, there's one or the other. Pick a choice. I did get these from the Pride Center. Bonnie Johnson, who directs Pride Center, does a lot of training on LGBT issues, so she's got some good slides I'm going to borrow. This is certainly how I grew up. What the youth are saying is that it's not binary. So when you hear about non-binary, this is what they're talking about. They're saying people's sexual orientation, as well as gender identity, are along a spectrum. It's not either or. There are lots of things in between. So, up at the top, man, non-binary identities, woman. It used to be just man or just woman, and I'm going to get into the identities later, but that's getting into gender identity. That there are people who don't identify as either, or they identify as both, and or may change over time. And then the same thing with sexual orientation. You're either straight or you're gay, and then there are individuals who say, no, bisexuality is a thing, and then there are other terms, and pansexual is just one of many terms that are out there.
Is pansexual considered the same as bisexual?
Thank you, that's a great question. She asked if pansexual is not considered the same as bisexual. Pansexual really gets into being attracted to straight, gay, man, woman, trans. It's a much more open way of being attracted to something. Okay? If you think about yourself, right? Think about your own sexual orientation. I'm a straight woman. I'm only attracted to men. That's just who I am, right? And for most of us, it's an immediate thing. Like, oh yeah, of course. There are some people who find that they're attracted to both. And then there are some people who meet a trans individual and they fall in love with the trans individual. So it's a much more, it gets into that notion of fluidity, of a spectrum. So really they talk about the non-binary is making room for and acknowledgement of the middle, that there are other ways to be. Okay, I really like this slide because it's very kindergarten, bright colors, got a cute little unicorn, and I think, so it's put out by the Trans Student Organization. And I think what I like about it the most is that it really emphasizes the fact that many of us develop our sexual orientation and our gender identity at a very young age. Again, if you think about yourself, when did you know you were a girl? When did you know you were a boy? It happens pretty early. I'm not going to get into all of the details, but it really highlights all of the different ways to think about oneself. There's gender identity, which I'll get into in a sec, or more. There's expression, so gender identity is how one feels inside. I identify as a woman, a cisgender woman. Cisgender meaning that I am, my gender identity matches my sex assigned at birth. My gender expression, a little more masculine. I love wearing pants, I love wearing men's shoes, I like t-shirts and jeans, not a big skirt person. That's an issue of gender expression, of how one identifies. Sex assigned at birth, this is going to get into gender identity a little bit later, and then the notion of physical emotion. And what this says is that you can rate yourself along all of these different axes, that it's not, again, it's really pushing the fact that it's not a binary, the way that children think about it today. I'm going to skip those a little bit. Okay. So LGBT, I'm going to hit on the T for a little bit. T stands for transgender, which is the same thing as trans. The newest term that the youth are bringing in is genderqueer. Are there folks in here who remember growing up when queer was considered a slur? Yeah, I grew up thinking queer is a slur. Today's kids, they own it, they take it, they use it often. So this is where we start seeing some of the generational gaps. But genderqueer, just like trans, so trans historically has meant someone who is assigned male or female at birth. And the way we're assigned, how are we assigned? Doctor pulls us out, looks what's between our legs, assigns male and female. It's a boy, it's a girl. So gender identity looks at, or transgender identity looks at someone who is born assigned, let's say female, but over time begins to feel and acknowledge, I'm not a female. I'm not a female inside. I'm a boy. And you hear children start saying that. Children who are assigned, who are daughters in a family saying, Mommy, I'm a boy. I don't want to wear these dresses. I don't want to do those things. I'm a boy. Trans, going across, right? Cis is a scientific chemistry term. Cis is the same. Anatomy, sexual anatomy matches the gender identity. Trans, sexual anatomy does not match the gender identity. But it's blown out, according to the youth. In the last several years, a host of new terms have been developed. Genderqueer, so instead, trans used to be kind of the main umbrella term. Genderqueer is now the main umbrella term. There are lots of things beneath that. You have gender nonconforming. In the 1920s, I would have been described as dressing in a gender non-conforming manner because women could not wear pants. Men who wear skirts, men who wear makeup, men who have long hair, those are considered gender non-conforming. Based on our social expectations and then how the individual expresses. Gender expansive, that's really getting into that fluidity, into that non-binary sense. Mommy, I'm a girl today, but I feel like a boy tomorrow. You have adolescents who feel that same way. Gender non-binary gets into that same idea. Gender fluid, you have agender. Some people say, I don't identify as a gender. I don't identify as male, I don't identify as female. Or you have some people who feel like they identify as both. For many of us, this is like a big change from the way that we grew up. I grew up in the 80s. I watched a lot of MTV, and there was a lot of gender bending on MTV, and I think that's what kind of exposed me and made me feel very comfortable with it over time. And there are even more terms that are not listed here. But if you get a sense, all of these individuals identify in some ways being genderqueer. Right? And some you might say, you might not say this out loud, or you might say this to somebody next to you, I can't tell if that person's a boy or a girl. Or I can't tell if that person's male or female. Right? It's this notion of the fluidity. It's not the kind of thing that you want to say publicly. It's not the kind of thing you want to say to a child.
That's been around for a long time.
Say again?
That's been around for a long time, looking at somebody, now we're more aware of it and verbalize it, but
Yes.
I'm pretty old. I've seen all that stuff.
Yeah.
And it's been around, but, girls particularly who dress
Androgynous.
masculine.
Yes, exactly. Right. And so again, historically, it's been around for a long time. We just never really had the labels for it, and now we're developing labels for it. Time. Okay. So I mentioned before, it's a general term for gender and sexual minorities who are not cisgender and or heterosexual. So you might have individuals who identify as lesbians who might call themselves genderqueer, particularly those who may be a little bit more masculine in terms of their presentation. There's lots of overlap between queer and trans identities, but not all queer people are trans and not all trans people are queer. Okay. A lot to keep up with, but I think part of your role is to kind of learn that these things are possible and then to engage in some discussion with youth about how they see themselves, and we'll get into that. I already mentioned the word queer is still sometimes used as a hateful slur. Just be careful with its use. I will say the same thing. So, transgender, as a concept, you all might have heard transsexual when you were growing up or when you were younger. And transsexual really did deal with the individuals who actually had surgery to change their anatomy to fit their gender identity. And so when I've met older individuals from this area who identify as trans, they self-identify as transsexual. But that is not the same as trans, it's under the umbrella. So what I mean by that is there are many individuals who identify as trans or transgender, but they've never had surgery. Or maybe they've just had top surgery. So if it's a trans male, right, it's someone who is born and assigned female at birth, they identify as being male, so that they may decide to get a mastectomy to fit their identity. But some people have never gotten surgery. Some people have never done anything. They just dress and express themselves in a way that fits their sense of gender identity. All right. Okay, and then the plus, Q, so that's what the Q in the alphabet is for, it's queer. Other people say, no, it's not queer, it's questioning. We're in the midst of a lot of social change, so these things have not been set in stone yet. So depending on who you're talking to, depending on what city you're in, depending on the age of the person, they might say, no, Q is queer, or somebody will say, no, it's questioning. There are additional letters, there's I, A, there's intersex, there's asexual, but really I'm just going to leave it here for now. The hope is that this will interest you enough that you'll start kind of learning more about the field. Okay, goal of healthcare, do no harm. That's what Vita says all the time, do no harm. This may not jive with your own personal values, it may not jive with how you grew up. There are a lot of things in the world that we may not agree with, but in our role of healthcare providers, the golden rule is to do no harm. So how do we do that in this role? We're supposed to help, heal, and enhance the lives of an individual, family, couple, organization, and or system. A lot of times you'll have children who are coming in whose parents are very uncomfortable or disapproving of this. How do we work as professionals to strengthen that family and allow that child to reduce their distress? We need thorough and accurate information. And then when a child feels unsafe to share aspects of their life or internal state, care is compromised. So that's really where this talk is about. How can we get to a point to where we can help a child, we can meet them where they are and help a child share aspects of themselves that they may have otherwise not felt safe to share before. So give you some examples. So promoting good care. Kids are going to crush. They're going to have school friendships, they're going to have crushes, they're going to have bullying. Their sexual orientation and gender identity is developing. It's there, and it's developing, and it's kind of becoming more nuanced, and they're trying to figure things out. There's a lot of risk at this time, again, for LGBTQ youth. Leila Alcorn, has anybody heard of Leila? She was a trans girl who'd been bullied at school. I think she posted something on Facebook about being bullied and being depressed, and she walked into a street and was hit by a truck. Suicide by a truck. Corey Mason, a trans girl, did a whole, I think she did a blog online talking about her bullying, and she did the kind of poster board, and it brought a lot of attention to the bullying that trans and LGBT youth experience. This kind of thing you hear about a lot when kids come in. Yeah, I hear kids behind me saying, is that a boy or a girl? Or they call me he or she, or they call me a she-male. That's a real problem.
I knew I was bisexual when I was in middle school, but I didn't really know how to express it. Sometimes you can hear the teachers whispering when you're passing in the hallway talking about it. I had teachers make comments to me before, and I reported it. I said, if it makes you feel uncomfortable, I'm sorry, but sometimes your comments that you say really affect the way I feel, makes me feel uncomfortable in your class. It was affecting my learning, like my grades had dropped a little bit because I didn't want to come to school, I wasn't paying attention. It was just bothering me so much that I had to say something.
My name is Alea. I'm in the 11th grade and I am a lesbian. I've gotten used to people saying derogatory words to me. Somebody yelled out the window and called me a dyke and a butch. Certain people still hide the fact that they're a homosexual from their parents. And they look at school as a place of safety for guidance counselors, teachers, and if a homosexual is in class and a teacher says something, they're gonna feel like they still in this shell where they can't come out and be who they really are.
It's like, I don't understand how you can judge someone just because of their sexuality. That doesn't mean they're an alien.
Words and actions could affect homosexuals, whether they're in the closet or outside of the closet.
Sit in our seat and look and let us show you what you're doing to us. Because I know a lot of teens don't feel comfortable at all.
Another point promoting good care is, let's say you're working in an area where you're doing asking about healthcare history. This is an area where you can learn a lot about the concerns of LGBTQ youth. So Individuals who identify as trans are individuals who are assigned female at birth but identify as male. And if they're adolescents, they're not going to get surgery, but they might do something called binding. And there are things that you can purchase that will just essentially flatten the test. A lot of individuals who have gender dysphoria, they don't feel good about their body. Dysphoria, it's the opposite of euphoria. So they don't feel good about being male, they don't feel good about being female. A lot of that worsens as kids hit puberty, right? Because the secondary sex characteristics start to develop. So before you hit puberty, kids kind of look the same. You can, if you're assigned female and you identify as a boy, you can cut your hair short. If you're assigned male but you identify as female, you can wear your hair long, you can do things. But once you start hitting puberty, once pubic hair comes, once genitalia start to develop, that's when these children are shocked, are astounded by the sense that they don't feel good in their bodies. So when you see kids in school or in different kinds of homes who seem uncomfortable with their bodies, they're wearing large t-shirts, they're wearing baggy things, they're trying to hide their body, that might be telling you something about this individual. If you see kids who are losing a lot of weight, eating disorders develop at the point of puberty for a lot of individuals who identify as trans, right? If you're developing secondary characteristics of a female, you're growing boobs, you're growing hips, a lot of kids who identify as male will stop eating because you don't develop the fat deposits, you don't develop the boobs or hips. Or if you are assigned female at birth and identify as male, you might stop eating, you might start working out a lot because you want to develop the kind of sinewy body. And then substance use becomes an issue at this point too. You have high levels of gender dysphoria, you start to become depressed, you start to feel uncomfortable in your body. What do we do when we drink our wine, drink our beers, smoke cigarettes, etc.? When we start using substances, it's often to escape, it's often to feel better. And so we start to see those linkages there. You also start, now I want to make a point here. Not all trans youth, not all lesbian, gay, or bisexual youth feel dysphoria. Right? If they're in accepting families, if they're very secure in their identity, you won't see some of these things. They seem to be fairly happy. They have a good support system. Paying attention to that. If you see bullying in school, is the kid crumbling because they're believing what the kids are saying about them? That might be telling you something about some self-hatred that's going on. If this kid is like, that's their problem. They're saying that, I'm comfortable. That's telling you that they've got some psychological resources that you can work with. You don't have to come out and say, are you lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender? But you can be observant, you can watch what these kids are doing or saying, how they're dressing, and you can be curious. You can ask appropriate questions. Hey, I like that hat. Hey, I like that new hairstyle. If you've got a good relationship, you can start picking up on cues. They feel comfortable with you, and they might start divulging or disclosing some things to you. Same thing, family dynamics is not unique to LGBTQ. All kids have these things. But if you see parents who are rejecting or who are confused or ambivalent, this will come out in the dynamics. We will have parents who will come to the clinic who will say, something's wrong with my kid. Or, I just need you to fix my kid. That's telling me that they're confused, that they are not accepting of this, and that they want something done to fix it. And it pops up and you will see this easily.
How do you deal with that? With the parents and the families not accepting these kids?
It is walking a tightrope. It's very complicated. Well, I will say kind of very generally what we try to do, and it really depends on the age of the kid, right? If the kid is much younger, you're going to have a different tact than if the kid is a late adolescent. But in the end, as a provider, you have to maintain the So you have to have some connection with them. But what you end up doing, it could be that you work on that alliance with the parent, and then you work on helping the parent allow you to develop a particular relationship with a child. So that you might be talking about certain things in session with the child that you're not disclosing to the parent, right? So you're allowing them to develop their identity within the room with you. And then over time, you might be helping that child find ways to communicate with the family, or find ways to have an uneasy peace within the family.
And it's probably basic, really difficult.
Yes, it can be difficult, but not impossible. Technology, this is the biggest one. This is the biggest generational shift. I didn't have the internet growing up. I didn't have cell phones. I didn't have Facebook. I didn't have Snapchat. I didn't have TikTok. I didn't have the world following me everywhere I went. So the notion of internet bullying is huge among all children, but particularly among LGBTQ children. You can meet strangers on the internet, and if kids are feeling depressed and engaging in self-loathing, to find adults or other people out there who can provide them support is great, as long as it's an appropriate source of support. So this is where kids can start getting in trouble, if they're engaging in some of this internet searching outside of their parents' knowledge. However, the internet has been amazing for LGBTQ youth, because now they can see youth and they can see adults represented before they never had. And so there is a really positive thing about social media and the internet. They can see someone who's happy. They can see someone who's in a relationship. They can see someone who has transitioned and has a child and has a successful job. And so that notion of media it's a very powerful tool. But parents and caregivers have to be aware of how it's being used. So this is my final slide, and I'll see if people have more questions and come back to your issue about faith. So I would say the next steps, if this is something you're interested in, and I hope you are, you want to educate yourself, you want to learn the language. It is a new and ever-changing language, and I am probably behind already. But if you keep up with culture, if you keep up with youth culture, I get LGBT magazines just because I want to see what people are talking about, what's in the ether, just to keep track of the language. Educate yourself by watching videos, or plenty of videos out there. There are plenty of movies or plenty of documentaries, articles, CE events, discussions to educate yourself about this. And then, in terms of working with youth, start asking them to speak about their experiences using their own words, right? So again, something we learned. We take what the client or the patient gives us, and we use that to have a dialogue. We may not know the term that they use to identify themselves. What you can do, and you might want to practice it, and it's tough to learn, when you introduce yourself, when you meet somebody, hi, I'm so-and-so, my pronouns are he and her, he and his, I'm so-and-so, my pronouns are they and theirs. What that does is the same thing. It provides the opportunity for someone to say, oh, hi, I'm so-and-so, or the person just say, hi, I'm Joey. Doesn't matter, but even just that little thing communicates to somebody who might identify as LGBTQ. Oh, they know about that. Maybe that's somebody I can talk to later about these issues.